Hey guys, welcome back to Dear Frannie. I am your host, Catherine LeBlanc. I am a fractional chief marketing officer and also the founder of Franchise Fractionals, a network of fractional leaders that are helping brands reach new growth potential. I am going to kick off our intros today with Marianne Murphy and Marcia Reed. They are joining me again as our panelists. And Marianne, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Great. Marianne Murphy with Franchise Pulse. I am a fractional integrator, or COO, and I partner with, in the emerging space, franchise visionaries and founders that are looking to crystallize their vision and put it into action and move it forward with their teams.
Awesome. Marcia.
Excellent. I am Marcia Mead with M Squared Franchise Consulting. We offer boutique style fractional franchise development consulting to franchisors. And I have been in franchising for 23 years, and I just love and adore our industry.
Awesome. I can't wait to dig into questions with you guys. We have so much experience to comb through. But first, we're going to find out what these leaders in franchising are reading so that we can stay ahead of the game in our own libraries. So Marianne, let's start with you.
I picked it up from a podcast, and now I can't remember which one or who said it, but it's The Speed of Trust with by Covey. And what I like about it, actually, I'm absorbing it from two perspectives: is how do you develop trust with others, but then how do you examine your own trust of others? So there's kind of this little double-edged sword on that, and it's it really, and they, all the footnotes are like, it's a game changer, but I really think it is when you're looking at a mentality and you're looking to lead people. Have you developed trust? Do they trust that you have the vision to get them where they need to go?
And I'm gonna, if I had an emoji, it'd be a red face, because that was what I was reading too. So I'll just add on to that. I have also read The Speed of Trust, and for me, the aha moment, because a lot of what he talks about, I think that you pick up in professional development world, right? Of how to show up for others. But I think what he adds to it is why it's important, right? So showing up early to the meeting or on time for the meeting then lets that person know that you're reliable. And it's those small acts of trust that really build into a trusted person, professional. But I also think that brands can, when you're thinking about brand positioning and when you're thinking about really developing out what your brand voice is, you also have to think about how you're building trust with your customer. And so you can take some of those same principles and apply them to your customer communications. So, when you send them an email and you say, I'm going to call you in 10 minutes, you really call them in 10 minutes. Or, it's a very simple example. But yeah, so I'm going to piggyback off of what Marianne said, because that's what I'm reading too.
And I think in our industry, for those of us who love franchises, and after 36 years in this business, I am always astounded at the level of trust that we can impart with franchise prospects, right? They are taking their life savings, everything that they've saved, and investing it in a group of people, literally a group of people and a brand, and counting on that to propel them to the next opportunity in their life. So, and I know, the people that I know, we take that very seriously, on that, because and again, that's like the ultimate trust, in my opinion.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Giving somebody else your money, that is the ultimate trust. Help me grow. Marcia, have you read Speed of Trust?
I have not, but I wrote it down because, the world that I live in of franchise development, boy, that I can't wait to read it and share it with the rest of the folks that I work with.
Okay, so then what are you reading?
So I just got, it just came. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm super excited to get into, it's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, and it's spelled crazy, so we can add that into the details. But it was recommended to me by another one of our great peers in franchising, and the recommendation came in the form of, I am reading a book right now that I have now read twice, and I'm about to go into it a third time. And I
Oh,
said,
wow.
well, I need to order that right now. If it's, I mean,
Yeah,
Big.
wow, this must be life-changing.
for sure.
So, but it's this amazing story. Viktor Frankl was actually talks about it's an account of his time in a Nazi concentration camp. But the book is really geared towards business and life. And it talks about what he calls his theory of meaning.
Okay.
And it's all about what he is theorizing is the primary human drive of discovery and pursuit. And that's what we find meaningful. That's where we find our individual meaning in life. So discovery and pursuit. And of course, that rings true to what we do in franchising. So I'm
Mhm.
excited to dig into it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
On
great.
my
So
list.
yeah, give us a book review when you get through it, if it's worth the third time reading.
Exactly. I'll let you know. And not a long read, right? So
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll buzz
let's
through it and I'll let you guys know.
Okay, awesome. Well, good.
I just
Okay.
like that you actually have the book. Like, everybody,
Yeah.
I'm like, usually have the book, the auditory. I'm like, I'll do it all.
Oh, I like that actual sound of a book.
Awesome. Okay, so before we jump into our question of today, just a quick word from our sponsor. Dear Frannie is brought to you by Franchise Fractionals. Scaling your franchise doesn't mean going it alone. With Franchise Fractionals, you have access to the top tier talent you need when you need it. From finance to operations and marketing, our fractional executives have been where you want to go. Don't let the full-time commitment of executive roles hold you back. Visit franchisefractionals.com today to discover how our leaders can help pave the way for your franchise's success. Because here at Dear Frannie, we're all about bringing you insights that matter and leadership that drives growth. All right, so to jump into our question of today, and this one I'm super excited to talk to Marcia and Marianne about. And I think I'm just going to be a spectator on what they say. So our question today is, we are growing at a healthy rate, and we've worked hard to fine tune our franchisee selection process. But my ops team is still making snide comments about the quality of franchisees entering the system. I am sensing some growing resentment between my Fran Dev activities and my ops team. Is this normal? How can I involve the operations team in our selection process so that there is more buy-in? I don't know. I'm so excited to jump into this with you guys. I don't even know who to start with. I think, Marcia, I'll start with you because I have seen this firsthand, and I think that getting out in front of it is really important. But I haven't really ever talked in detail with a Fran Dev professional about it, so I am super curious to hear what you have to say.
Well, I love that I won the spinning wheel point. But I love this conversation. In 23 years of franchising, I've had an opportunity to be the franchisee. I've had an opportunity to work at home offices of franchises, and I've worked in those home office roles as the operations person, classroom trainer, support person of a franchisee. And I've also worked in that franchise development role. And when I start with a franchise organization, the first thing I say is, can I please have an interview and a meeting with the operational leader? Because if they're bringing me in for franchise development, the number one thing is if the ops and the Fran Dev can't get aligned and not singing the same song, rowing the boat in the same direction, whatever metaphor you want to use, boy, it's a huge problem. We've got to work together towards the goal of the entire organization. And what's most important is serving the customer of the franchisee, right? So I think number one priority, leader of operations, leader of franchise development have got to be aligned. They have to have the tough conversation. And I think it really goes to just being open and hearing each other, because we really do need each other. Operations, what do you need, right? When you tell me what you need, I'm assuming it's going to be along the lines of, these are the types of franchisees I'd like to see walk through the front door. So, all right, so here's exactly what you need. Let's define that persona out. And then what's the percentage of variance that you're willing to accept? Because
I love that question. I love that.
there's perfection, and then there's life.
Yeah, Right.
So I'll try to get as close as I can to 100%, but it's never going to be 100%, right?
Right.
Even 99 might frustrate an operations person. So, and then the ops people need to ask, what does franchise development need, right? Because boy, we don't have we don't have a discovery process without operations. We don't have a discovery day without operations. We don't have validation without happy franchisees that are willing to take their time to validate. So it really has to go both ways.
I love that. Marianne, what do you think?
Well, thank you for asking. And I think, it's funny. It's one of those you have to back up to go forward. And it's always communication. And if you're an emerging brand, the franchisees who came on board with you in your very early days are bigger risk takers, right? They just are, because you don't have any franchises. They're like, yeah, I'm going. And as you grow, the lure of the brand itself and the success of the brand, you're getting probably a mix of people that are attracted to the brand, but slightly more risk averse, but they've seen everybody else's success. So that can be it's like, they're not jumping in the same way that the first people did. So your business coaches are kind of like, this guy's not, he's not engaging, he's not jumping in, he's not, so there are different types of people. So I think it always goes back to your business planning as a franchisor. And you like at minimum, a same page meeting for your team when you're doing your business planning, right? So we all start our business planning and we're projecting what we're going to do, how many franchises we're going to bring in, who are the types of franchises, but you really have to look at and do a reflection on what has changed for us as the franchisor, and then kind of look out and say, what has changed for the franchisees? What have we brought to the table? What have we not brought to the table, right? That they're expecting, maybe something that was on a hot list that is no longer on a hot list. So you kind of always have to keep those parking lot items open, because you're always going to get that franchisee that says, I thought this, right? I thought we were going to do a Super Bowl commercial. Where is that? And we know, like, back 36 years ago, franchisees were like, why can't we just do a Super Bowl commercial? Won't that cure everything? So their expectations. So what has changed in the persona, mostly of the brand, because the brand is going through creativity changes, leadership changes, bringing in new people, losing people. Like, the franchise business acts exactly the same way as the franchisee business. You gain people, you lose people, so that reflective same page thing is what's changed for us, what's changed for them, is what we're looking for any different, or are we kind of making exceptions where we shouldn't, right? And you just got to have the conversations.
What are some so Marcia, I really love the process that you outlined as far as, having that conversation, opening up the door for ops, but really being structured on, look, I'm going to build a persona of our ideal franchisee. What, from the ops perspective, do you want me to put into this, gumbo of a persona? And then Marianne, hearing you talk about, like, okay, that's not a one and done conversation. That's a conversation that needs to happen. Sounds like maybe on an annual basis during your planning of, okay, this is what our persona looks like. What changes do we need to make to it? And certainly, I think that with experience, you're going to get franchisees who maybe weren't a good fit, and so it's identifying, okay, why weren't they a good fit? Let's make sure to address that in the future. One question I have for you guys is, on that, who takes the first step, right? Like, should the ops team wait for Fran Dev to come and ask them the question, or how does that conversation get started?
Yeah, we've had this conversation before, and it came under the guise of who feels the friction first, right? On different things, yeah. So Marcia, why, because I think we almost both agreed that almost franchise development kind of feels the friction first.
Yes. And it usually comes in the form of like a surprise, right? If you haven't taken that proactive step of the alignment of the leaders of the two departments, then the friction usually comes in a poor validation call, or there's a step in the discovery process that involves an operational executive, and that person either phoned it in and didn't really actually interview the candidate, or maybe just wouldn't even make, oh, well, I've got time 3 weeks from now. Well, that doesn't work. So there's usually some, that's where kind of the snide comments start, right? We start kind of bickering back and forth a little bit, and that's usually what presses it into a conversation. So to Marianne's point, I think it's a great idea to have like an annual meeting. And of course, the leadership probably is meeting more regularly than that. And if these things aren't getting shaken out between the two of them, then it's going to take the whole leadership team to work together to bring everyone together.
And I think that the leadership in that, looking at, it's not just looking at what the future looks like. It's like, look what happened during the last year. So, and if any brand out there, if you're not profiling your franchisees, right, using some type of mechanism that says, is this a good fit culturally? Is it a good fit that they should be in business for themselves or whatever? There are wonderful tools out there. The second part of that is the ability to use that type of profiling up against it goes down to unit level economics. Who were your franchisees that hit their benchmarks out of the gate? They're on the right journey. And yeah, there's going to be setbacks or things like that, but they're on the journey. Like the percentage, you should always be looking at the percentage of people who hit their benchmarks. And it should always run in the 80% opportunity. Like 80% of the people coming in are going to hit those benchmarks and then elevate to the next level. Use those, and whatever company that you're using should be able to take all of those profiles and kind of bang them up against each other and look at what were the key opportunities and the key common traits that were that are in that group of people, and then how do we bring that back to how we're looking at people when we're starting the interview process. And it's never those types of profiles. Everybody looks at it's not a yes or no on those profiles. What it does is provide guidance for the franchise development team and the operations team to ask the pertinent questions. Because if somebody's not a dead ringer fit, and even if they are, you got to dig a little bit deeper and ask those questions so that you're going to get how somebody's actually going to act once they're a part of your brand.
When you just mentioned kind of that it's not a green light or a red light based on just a personality index that you might have. Tell me, I would love to hear about I've been part of brands that have involved the entire executive team on evaluating candidates and saying yes or no. I've been part of brands that really just do that in the Fran Dev space. So I'd love to hear what y'all's experience has been on that kind of franchisee approval process.
You want to start, Marcia?
Sure. So I think this whole conversation around a profiling tool, just to put a pin in that piece of the conversation, is an opportunity for a realignment if the ops and Fran Dev teams have become misaligned, because the tool, in my opinion, should be used not just to survey and understand your franchise owners, but also to qualify franchise owners. And then it should follow them throughout their lifetime as operations people are supporting them within the franchise system. And it really should become a part of the culture within the organization. Everyone in the home office should use terms from the profiling tool if everybody's on board and really aligned on it. Sorry, Catherine, I got lost in my own point and lost your question.
That's a great point, though. I was asking on kind of franchisee approval processes. Yes. Who's involved? What goes into that decision in addition to the personality indexes? And kind of what have you seen at different types of organizations?
So I really believe it's the franchise development team person that's delivering this packaged franchise candidate in for approval. It is their job to qualify, not just intrigue and transfer enthusiasm and get somebody excited enough to take that massive trust step to become a franchise owner, but to truly qualify that potential franchise owner and then take them to the final approval process. And thinking of all the things that franchisors can do and what that can look like. Of course, it can look like so many different things. And in an ideal and perfect world, there's some kind of mid-process qualifier that puts another set of eyes, like an executive interview or something along those lines, so that an executive gets 1 hour, maybe halfway through a process for sure before a discovery day, to put a different opinion, a different conversation. It's amazing, and everybody in franchising will laugh at this, but it's amazing how potential franchisees and franchisees say one thing to one person and something different to someone else, right? That's why it's also important to collect validation notes from franchise owners, because it's amazing what candidates will say to franchise owners. But have that mid-process executive step. And then when it comes to discovery day, whether it's virtual or in person, however the brand is coming to that final conclusion of the discovery event, whether you call it Meet the Team or whatever you're calling it within your brand, there absolutely has to be in the agenda for the team, especially executives, department heads, leaders of every piece of the organization, a meeting immediately following the event, that right there on the spot, after you just spent time with those people, you are going through and every person has a vote and everybody is weighing in on, do I believe in this person? Where do I think they'll be challenged? Everybody's going to be challenged, right? None of us are perfect. So what are the challenges going to be? And do we think we can lead this person through that to the success that they just told us they're looking for?
Right. And how do you record those challenges? Because I know I've been part of those discussions before. And so, to Marianne's earlier point, on our previous episode, we talked about that continuity of communications. So is that where you kind of can record those challenges and say, okay, a year later, when this franchisee is actually becoming a franchisee in our system, we can pull that up and say, we knew that knocking on doors was going to be a challenge. So let's heavy up on that in training.
It's interesting. I've seen franchisors that everyone has that meeting and then everybody goes off and runs their departments, and there's no traction on it. And to your point, if it's a brick and mortar retail or restaurant business, it will be a year until that person actually starts running the business. So it will get forgotten, maybe not so much in like a home service franchise or something that doesn't involve brick and mortar, but yeah, if that doesn't go down, what a miss. If it doesn't go down in the CRM in the background of notes, that should all be part of, the really important step that sometimes gets left off is the handoff, right?
Yeah.
When that person signs a franchise document, Fran Dev and Ops having a meeting, handoff of documentation and notes. And if they're not using the same CRM, because a lot of franchisors have separate CRMs, for franchise development operations, if they're not using the same CRM, the Fran Dev stuff has to go over into the CRM for operations.
Right. Awesome. Marianne, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's funny, and it's to break it down or to simplify it, right? There's you have your departmentals, right? You have your sales and marketing, because let's kind of face it, once franchise development makes the sale, it's kind of off their plate.
Yep.
It's off their plate, which is why this connectivity is so important. So you have your sales and marketing department, you have operations, and you have finance, and then you have the franchisee validators, right? So there's 4 different departments that are pretty much facilitating and helping in the sale, right? Those are the people that most franchise prospects are going to meet with. And then each of those, as Marcia said, should have time with the prospect, asking whatever the pertinent questions are. And finance plays a very key role in this. Are they well capitalized? Are they going to be able to, get over that hurdle? And then operations, like, are they going to follow through? Marketing, are you going to do your marketing spend? And I think that and again, this is just kind of a personal opinion to get comparative answers, because when you're challenging somebody on, the operations part or the financial part or this, that, and the other thing, is like, why do you want to be a franchise in our system? And what will you do to contribute to the success of our brand? Right. And so if each department is asking that and the answers aren't consistent or they just don't ring true, that could be a red flag. Right. And the same thing with franchisee validators. Marcia brought that up. It's, it's like, what story are you getting there? Because they can ask franchisees anything they want. right? So you'll want to focus on what types of questions did the franchise prospect ask the, your existing franchisees about profitability, path to profitability. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, especially if you have an item 19. Is everybody saying the same thing? Or is somebody blowing smoke and not getting it? And then the answers that you're getting from the prospect, do they resonate? Did they hear what their responsibilities were going to be once they became a franchise?
Right.
Because they are ultimately responsible for the success of their own business, right? If they come in and they think, and it's funny because I've been a part of where marketing programs were so oversold that they, especially when the digital or the internet or the interweb and all this other stuff came in, everybody thought that was the grand solution to the success of every business.
Right.
And certainly it wasn't. It contributed to it, of course, but are they going to, because that's just one aspect of it, right? And if you look at the wheel of marketing now, there's so much. Are they going to do their part? Or do they just think they're coming in, sitting back, and business is going to come? And if those answers don't jive, if they are not giving you the answers you need on what the work is that they're going to do, red flag.
What are some red flag questions, like if a franchisee in that validation process, because you guys both brought up the importance of circling back with those validators to find out about their conversations with the franchisees. What are, I'm curious, not being part of that franchise sales process, what are some of those red flag questions that they're digging into with your validators that, you're like, oh, shoot, we've got to pull back a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm laughing because there's so many that you cross your fingers and you hope they don't come back after in the validation notes from your franchise owners. But I mean, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is the question. Sometimes I'll get a feedback note from a franchisee that says, I spoke to this person for 45 minutes and all they asked me about was this one thing. When do I make money? Or how long does it take to break even? Like they're super financially focused, but they're not asking questions about a day in the life and what does it take to be successful? There's like a miss of questions sometimes. Sometimes franchise candidates will come clean basically to a franchise owner with something, maybe they've told the developer, maybe this franchise concept requires full-time, leave your job, very, very scary commitment. And you've got to be 100% engaged for the success to be what that person is saying they want the success to be. And they sometimes will come clean and tell the franchisee like, well, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna cut back to like 30 hours a week with work and run this business at the same time. Because sometimes you get those massive red flag type of things that will come up just from the conversations.
That's good. Okay. Awesome. Marianne, have you ever heard of the horror story?
Oh yeah. In fact, what we were saying, Marcia, it's like you can't say to a prospect, in the immortal words of Taylor Swift, you look like my next mistake. But anyway, I think for an emerging brand, it can be hard because the enthusiasm, the excitement of landing your first deals is so enticing.
Yeah.
But as you grow and you have, legacy or veteran franchises in, you have to ensure or make sure that your prospects speak to every level of the business. Because starting a business is hard. I don't care what anybody says. It's very hard. And there's work involved. Will you do the work to get to where you want to go? And I often came across people who would say, well, I spoke with such and such a franchisee and they said that, all of these things that are going on and they're not that and my question always to them was, what will you do differently? Because sometimes they'll get involved with the squeaky wheel, somebody who's not doing the work, somebody who's not, which is great. It's great when they speak to those people because then your next question is, what will you do differently? And if you're not going to do anything differently than what that person is saying that they're doing, then you're going to be just like them. So which franchise do you identify with as far as doing the work, getting the marketing done, and doing all of these things? So again, challenging and asking those questions back to that prospect is key because it also gives them a chance to think about what they're doing.
Yeah. And so Marcia, coming back to our original question around how do I get the ops team and the Fran dev team to work closer together? it's obvious that the two of you guys have kind of cracked the code as far as why it's important for those departments to work together. We talked a little bit about kind of how to start that conversation. And going back to, if it's not working for you, it's not working for me. So let's get together and figure it out. On Marianne's last point, that it's such a great kind of circle around question of like, okay, great. If that validator wasn't kind of spinning rainbows, then how would you react to it? Marcia, in your kind of the training and how you came up through Fran Dev, are those types of strategies very common in the franchising industry? Or, a lot of times you hear about, Fran Dev only focused on the sale versus focused on the quality of candidate. And certainly, every person brings something different to the table in regards to their position. But, can you give us just a little bit of some best practices or standards that we should expect out of a Fran Dev professional?
It's a good question. I always like to tell people I've done this for 23 years and I sleep really well at night. And what I mean by that is I know that the standard, in my opinion, and of course you're going to get varying opinions from other franchise development professionals, but in my opinion, the standard is to do right by the franchisor, the brand, and to do right by the franchise candidate. And that means that we have to do the work to qualify the candidate while we're getting them excited about the brand. And we have to ensure that there is an entire team that is available to support them based off of what they're telling you success looks like. And you have to truly look at every component of qualifying, right? Can they financially afford it? Is the resume experience there? One of the most important things that I always think about is timing. Boy, we've all been there, even in our personal lives. I can't tell how many of my friends have come to me and said, well, I met the right person, but it just isn't the right time, right? Mm-hmm. It's got to be the right time. And the biggest thing is, what is the need of that franchise candidate? What is driving them to make this invest potentially more than their life savings through a loan to come into this franchise business, quit their job, go to their spouse if they're married with kids, and say, I'm going to quit work. I'm going to go do this thing in an industry I've never worked in before, right? And it's going to be just fine. So what is the pain and the need that's driving them? Yeah. Is their spouse on board? Just like the franchise development team needs the operations team on board, right? They're our spouse in the office. We've got to all work together. And if you don't have standards and protocols in place to truly measure that within your franchise organization, you'll end up with a lot of franchisees that you're helping transfer out, and you'll do more transfers than bringing in new. And that's not a good recipe for the people that own this franchise.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, to like loop back a little bit on the processes, when you have your departments going out, you should have some kind of standardized scorecard that each person fills out as objectively as possible. We all have our, like, this guy's great, this team is fabulous, and da 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 da. But if you can be as objective as possible, because again, you're looking for those, exuberant qualities that's going to make somebody a success in their local market. Are they going to go out and make the connections that's going to make their business a success? But if you can get some objective measurements from each of the four or however many people, just an objective analysis, look at those scores, justify the scores, talk it out, and say, can we help this person become a success, right? Or will they help themselves become a success? And actually, it's fun, like in the words of David Barr, who we all love, David Barr, can the average person on an average day with an average skill set succeed at your brand?
Yep.
Right? Have you put the tools and the resources in? And that, brings another, and we talked about this, what stage is your brand in? Because if your full resources aren't built out, you need somebody that's a little bit more innovative on a local level than what you're bringing to the table so far. Got big dreams and aspirations, needs a lot of money, needs a lot of people. So your franchise prospect's going to change over time, and you just got to keep up with that. But have as much objectivity as potential as possible. But then sometimes you are going with your gut and helping that make that happen for somebody.
Yep. And living with it for 10 years.
Yep.
At least. Awesome conversation. Thank you guys so much for contributing to that question. I know that, it was just so valuable to hear from experienced leaders in the field on how they've tackled these issues before. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge with us. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time on Dear Frannie.